Hello and welcome to Folsom Field. I am Matt Smith for Mile High Sports and 5280 Sports Network. Thank you very much for tuning in. Well, Colorado wraps up its non-conference schedule today as they go undefeated 3-0 by taking down the University of Northern Colorado Bears 41-21. It was the first matchup between these two schools in 83 years. It had been since 1934 since they last played, and Northern Colorado actually won the last game in the series before they stopped playing each other. So the Buffaloes, I guess in some way, shape, or form have bragging rights back, if you can call it that. But they accomplished today what they needed to, the Buffaloes did, and that's get this offense rolling once again. We talked about it in the podcast this week. It's been a major subject of question for the most part throughout this early season, that this offense just didn't feel like it was smooth yet, didn't feel like it was clicking yet. And today they needed to get out, start quickly. They didn't, went 3 and out on the first drive, and actually the defense, who hadn't allowed a touchdown all season long to this point, gave up a score their first drive of the game. So things were a little strange. Buffs didn't win the coin toss either. It was just a strange day all over, and one of those games that I describe, those winning ugly games that really are character builders within your team and your locker room. It certainly wasn't pretty today, but Colorado did get it done. We'll start with the offense first. 40 points for the first time this season. That is a positive sign. The offense was really kick-started. They, of course, come out a nice, pretty much Devin Ross and Phil Lindsay-centric drive to put the Buffaloes on the board first, but then a bad snap pinned UNC back deep. Of course, Jacob Callier comes away with it, and the next play, Phil Lindsay scampered in from 7 yards out. The Buffs took a 14-7 lead at that point. They would never trail again. The closest that Northern Colorado would get to them was a one-score game when they made it 28-21. But the Buffaloes' offense, for the most part today, very solid things, and I think a lot of development. And that's one thing that Mike McIntyre said post-game. It's certainly something that I noticed. Steven Montez took a step up today. Montez on the day, 29 of 41, 357 yards, 4 touchdowns, and that interception at the end of the first half, trying to squeeze something in during their 2-minute drill. But what I liked about Steven was his decisiveness today. He was getting the ball out faster. He was putting better touch on the ball, which was key. Missed a few open touchdowns in that game against Texas State last week. He did, of course, throw that interception today, and Mike McIntyre in the postgame saying that that should have been 7 points as well. But a very, very solid day for Steven, who did a good job staying inside of the pocket, I think. It was a brand new offensive line today, and we'll get into that. Jeremy Irwin makes the return after his 2-game suspension, and so does George Frazier, who, for all intents and purposes, is essentially another offensive lineman for this Colorado Buffaloes football team, with just how little the Buffs use the H-back, as a weapon in their passing attack. So Jeremy Irwin returns, and we had heard talk that he had seen a lot of reps in spring at guard. Well, today he returns at that left tackle position. That pushed Josh Kaiser to right tackle, which was strange because we saw him yanked last week against Texas State in favor of Isaac Miller, and on tape I thought Isaac Miller looked pretty good. But they ended up moving Kaiser to right tackle and shifting Hagler to right guard, which I thought was very interesting. It creates a very big right side of your offensive line. Quite frankly, Aaron Hagler flashed at times last season, but the first 2 games this year he has certainly struggled, and I can understand why they may have wanted to just move him inside, mix things up a little bit. Tim Lynott also moves to the center position, Jonathan Huckins to the bench. I think that's a really smart move. Tim Lynott is a heck of a player. He's going to go league one day, and I think it just makes too much sense to have him at that center position. Jonathan Huckins is a 5-year guy, but I think the versatility that he can provide you as your first lineman off the bench, having those reps at center and at guard over the years, I think that's really good. Phil Lindsay today, on Twitter, I said that it didn't seem to me that Phil looked to be his normal self. I didn't see the burst that I normally do, but the Buffaloes were persistent with the ground game today. Once again, that's back-to-back weeks. Phil now in the last 2 weeks with 52 carries for Phil Lindsay. Today it was 26 carries, just over 150 yards, and a touchdown on the ground as well. Pretty much outside of that, the running game was non-existent. Michael Adkins got 1 carry after Phil, I think, had 4 on the same drive, 4 consecutive rushes. He had 1 carry and then fumbled with a hat on the ball. It was a really nice play by the Northern Colorado defender. He fumbles, doesn't come back in the game. Kyle Levins, who returned after some injury, suffered dislocated hip, suffered in the offseason. He returned today, played a lot of special teams, but also saw a few snaps at running back as well. But the receivers won this game, in my opinion. The receivers were really the position group I thought today that shined the brightest. Shea Fields, Bryce Bobo, Devin Ross, and Jay McIntyre, your bread and butter, essentially, were the guys who really carried you today. And Steven did a great job of spreading the ball out for the most part. Devin Ross, who hadn't had a touchdown since the Oregon game last year, gets on the board for Colorado's first score of the game. 8 balls, 143 yards and a touchdown. Shea Fields also caught 8 passes, 8 receptions, 69 yards and a touchdown. Bryce Bobo, 6 catches, 77 yards and a touchdown. And Jay McIntyre in that second half, 4 catches, 53 yards, and he had that second half touchdown, which I thought it was just a good way to round out a very solid day through the air for the Colorado Buffaloes. So good things from the offense. 7 of 14 on third down. We had talked about that last week as an area of concern. The other thing, 5 of 6 in the red zone. The only time they didn't convert in the red zone was Michael Adkins' fumble. Talking about the defense now, this was a game where I thought we might see some adversity pop up and rear its head, especially defensively for Colorado, and it did. First drive of the game, Northern Colorado marches down and puts a score right away on the board. Listen, this Northern Colorado team has tons of talent on the outside on offense at the receiver position, and Jacob Knipp is a heck of a quarterback. Steven Montez in the postgame called him a freak. I mean, this kid is extremely accurate. He can make all the throws. All week leading into this game, head coach Mike McIntyre talked about the fact that he thought he was the real deal on film. He thought he could make every throw, and today he came out and proved it once again in what was a very emotional game for Northern Colorado. They came out, there was a lot of smack talking going on out there, especially with their DBs and CU's wide receivers. I thought a very physical matchup there before I get run over by the guys mowing the field here. Just move to the side. The other thing with the defense, only 4 tackles for loss today, just 1 sack, 2 takeaways. However, an interception late in the first half on a Hail Mary. Isaiah Oliver just picking that one off. Really nothing to talk about there. The undisciplined nature of this defense is something that we definitely have to talk about. The 114 penalty yards on 10 penalties is not something that is very characteristic of a Mike McIntyre Colorado football team. That is something I can guarantee you that there will be punishment in practice for, and quite frankly, could have blown the game had they been playing a more talented opponent. There were 3 late hit calls, 2 targeting ejections in the first half off Alabi Laguda with a targeting ejection. He would miss the second half of that game. He'll be back for Washington, but Chris Malumba in the second half was ruled targeting and roughing the passer. And from my vantage point, it wasn't either. A really bad call there. Of course, Jace Frankie with the final late hit for the Buffaloes. Like I said, they allowed a TD for the first time this season, which was going to happen. I think a lot of people were surprised that it had taken them this long, but it was today's game was a character builder for the defense. They didn't play well. Derek McCartney in the postgame came out and said he actually didn't think that they came to play. Mike McIntyre was asked if he would agree with Derek in that regard and vehemently disagreed. So he was saying that he didn't coach the defensive line well enough on some of the technical specific things that Northern Colorado was doing, and that allowed a few of those late hits to occur. The other things defensively, Ryan Moeller was injured in this game. Coach Mack, I asked him about it post-game. He said it was just a stinger for Ryan Moeller. That allowed Kyle Trago to play for the first time, really significant action for the first time in his career. Also, Nick Fisher making his season debut. Nick Fisher, one of those guys that a lot of fans were looking forward to seeing play this year after we had seen him flash last season and earn Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Week against Utah there. Fisher, of course, played in this game. Sorry, there's a B right next to me. Fisher, of course, plays in this game because Afolabi Laguda was ejected due to targeting. The Buffaloes did a very good job of stopping the run. That makes 2 of 3 games on the season that they have stopped the run and held their opponent under 100 yards. Today they held UNC to 71 yards. CSU they held to 88 yards rushing, which Coach McIntyre was talking about post-game, saying that if you want to beat good football teams, you have to be able to stop the run, and Colorado did that today for sure. Isaiah Oliver, I thought, was exposed just a little bit today. Alex Wesley, who I believe is a 400-meter champion in the Big Sky Conference, showed some really good speed. Coach McIntyre also kind of making up for Isaiah there, saying that he felt like he didn't coach those guys well enough this week. But Isaiah Oliver beaten today twice for 2 touchdowns. Alex Wesley, I think, had over 100 yards and 2 TDs on the day. Very solid day. And like I said, Jacob Knipp can really sling the ball. It was an impressive performance from Northern Colorado's quarterback. James Stefano, 2 of 2 for field goals. I thought that was another solid step forward. He's now just missed only 1 field goal this season, and I think it's a very positive sign heading into conference play that it would appear that the Buffaloes have their solution at that kicking position. Jay McIntyre also returned punts today for the first time in a while. That job had been Isaiah Oliver's after he had pretty much secured it with a touchdown return last season. J-Mac put back in there. I was saying on Twitter this week, and kind of been hounding this for a while, that I don't think the Buffs have the depth at corner to have the luxury of being able to put Oliver back there, speed and all. I just don't know how worth it is. And Coach Mack was saying that with the lack of wind today, he felt it was a pretty clear day. It was pretty overcast, but not very windy. It wasn't very hot. I thought that he felt that Jay McIntyre, Ronnie Blackman, they wanted to get a rotation of guys in at that punt returner position, and they certainly did that today. Special teams wise, the only other note, that one fumble was very strange, that punt in the first half. J-Mac had waved for a fair catch and was telling everybody to get away from the ball. And then Northern Colorado's punt coverage return unit held up Daniel Talley, a freshman DB on this team, held him up and saw the ball bouncing and kind of pushed him into the ball. It was a really outstanding individual effort. But either way, Colorado 41-21, 3-0 in the non-conference. And on this field next week, they're going to face the Washington Huskies in the rematch of the 2016 Pac-12 championship game. And boy, that is going to be a fun one for sure. Tons to get to for that game, and we'll have it on No Bull Just Buffs this week on Mile High Sports, and much more face-to-face coming out again this week. We got tons of great Buff coverage. Make sure you stay tuned. I'm Matt Smith. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter at @RealMattSmith. That's Matt with 1 T, at Mile High Sports, and at 5280 Sportsnet. Until next time, thanks for joining us from Folsom.